Hey, welcome back to another junior geometry video. In this video, we're going to chat about vectors. Now, a vector is two numbers that are inside a set of brackets. The vector indicates a movement from one point to another. Now, we've come across two numbers inside brackets before called coordinates. And we put the two numbers side by side and we put a comma in between. But in vectors, we put one number on the top and one number on the bottom. So the top number tells us which way to move, left or right, horizontally, and the bottom number tells us which way to move, up or down, vertically. So here's an example of what a vector would look like. 3/5 inside brackets. The top number moves 3 squares to the right, and the bottom number means 5 squares up. So we'd start on our grid and go 3 squares across and 5 squares up to end up at a new point. All right, let's go through some examples and see if you can follow along with how to draw the following vectors. Example 1, draw the vector for 7. So here's my grid. I'm going to start somewhere on the grid, and the top number means to go across 4, and the bottom number means to go up 7. So there is the point I start and there is the point I end, and I'm going to draw in my vector. This is what my vector looks like. A vector is just a line with an arrow to indicate direction. So that's my vector, that's my answer. And it was made up of going across 4 and up 7. All right, here's example 2. Draw in this vector, -3/5. So here's my grid. I'm starting somewhere on my grid. Now the -3 means I have to go to the left 3 squares, right? It's a negative. And then the 5, well, it's not negative, so I've got to go up 5 squares. So here's my start point and there is my finish point. And I'm going to draw in my vector from start to finish with an arrow. There is the vector of -3/5. And that was made up, remember, that was made up of going 3 squares to the left and 5 squares up. All right, example 3. What about this vector? Draw the vector 8/2. Well, I'm starting this point on my grid, and I have 8 squares to the right. It's a +8, so I've got to go to the right, +8 squares to the right, and it's a -2. So -2 means I'm going down 2 instead of going up 2. So I've got my start point, got my end point. I'm going to draw in my vector with an arrow to indicate the direction I have moved from one place to another. All right, what about this vector? Example 4, draw the vector -5, -5/4. They're both negatives, so when I go to get my grid and draw in my horizontal direction first, I'm going to go -5 to my left because that's what the negative means, to the left, and the -4 means to go down 4. So once again, I've got my start point, I've got my end point, I'm drawing in my vector to indicate a movement from one place to another and what direction I'm moving. All right, couple of tricky ones to finish. What would this vector look like? Draw the vector 0, 5. So here's my grid and here's what the vector would look like. So I've started down the bottom and the 0 means do not move sideways and 5 means go up 5. So it's basically starting somewhere and going up 5 squares. Right, example 6. What about this tricky one? Draw the vector 4, 0. So I've got my grid here. I've started at a particular point. The 4 means to go across 4 squares to the right. It's positive. And the 0 means do not go up or down. So I'm just going 4 squares to the right and not going up and down. Right, well, there's vectors for us. So thanks so much for hanging in and watching.